The UAE, home to Dubai and Abu Dhabi, recently shocked many people, making worldwide headlines with the announcement of a new 9% corporate tax rate. I'm going to tell you what this means for you and why it may not be a deal killer for the UAE. Hi, I'm Andrew Henderson. This is Nomad Capitalist, where we help 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors legally go where you're treated best. And for years, people flocked to the UAE, which had different types of companies, from mainland to offshore to free zone companies, to set up their businesses, to take advantage of basically no taxes at all. People have said, oh, well, Andrew, they've got a small VAT now. But essentially, all of your income, all your capital gains, all of your pretty much everything was taxed at zero. It was a great place to go and do business. It was a great place to bring your team or to hire a team. It was and remains in many ways very, very flexible. But now the UAE has jumped on the bandwagon of adopting a corporate tax rate. They announced recently a new 9% corporate tax rate, which takes effect on June 1st, 2023. And what they're going to do is have a two-tier system where they're going to give you basically an allowance on the first roughly $100,000, $102,000, 375,000 dirham, you don't have to pay. Above that, you're going to pay this new 9%. And so my idea, and I think the idea of a lot of people, I was recently on the radio in Dubai. We talked about this. If you'd like us to post part of that interview, leave a comment below. The idea was that the government is trying to keep up with this, the new global minimum tax, and that people actually expected a higher tax rate because the global minimum tax negotiations were set at, you're going to have a 15% tax rate. Now, I think a lot of people misunderstand the global minimum tax. We posted an episode about that separately, but the first target of the global minimum tax is very successful, very highly profitable, big multinational companies. Now, certainly, you could look at a company like Nomad Capitalist and say we're a multinational company, but the turnover that we have doesn't really reach the thresholds that the global minimum tax is initially targeting. The idea is that eventually you will have more and more countries deciding to raise their tax rates for the same reasons that the UAE said, hey, we want to be part of the global marketplace, we want to get along. Other countries are, making more demands on where tax rates are. Let's join the fray. And so again, the conversation when I was on Dubai Eye was, why wasn't it 15? Because that's what the global minimum tax is calling for. And so my idea, and some of the tax people that we work with's idea, was that you will see some of these countries that just kind of want to go along with the system, saying, all right, sure, hey, we'll volunteer to be taxed, no problem. Side note, I've said, and I continue to believe, that if you look at things like the CRS, the bank information sharing, you have some countries that don't join. You have some countries that don't care to join. You have some countries that just join and probably aren't doing it properly. I mean, I think there will always be places where you can go that are going to say, we don't want to be part of this. We don't want to tax you at 15%, which is why I believe having the right residence, having the right citizenship, having multiple options is going to be key so that you can potentially live in a place and be a citizen of a place and have your company in a place where they say, you know what, we're not going along with this 15%. At least having options will be good. But right now, the UAE has done this, essentially of their own volition, where they're going to start taxing corporations. Now, what's interesting to me is when you dig a little bit deeper, beyond the headline, people look at the headlines, they say, 9%, forget the UAE. Well, hold on a second. What they are in some regards doing is implementing a system that's not dissimilar to what happens in Hong Kong. Now, obviously, a lot of businesses, I just saw a headline on Bloomberg, a lot of even American businesses that are in Hong Kong have decided we don't want to be there anymore. So, but Hong Kong's tax system on the corporate side has always been that if you do business there, you pay tax. And there is, as the UAE is doing, a two-tier system. Your first, couple $100,000 is taxed at 8.25%, and then it goes up to 16.5% from there. So it's not zero. But if you're doing business there, you're hiring people there, all that, then you can pay zero. Now, it's not zero, but if you're doing business there and you have a local presence and you don't make a lot of money, a couple $100,000, then you pay a very low rate. And above that, you pay a relatively reasonable rate, just over the global minimum tax threshold. If you are offshore and you meet a whole number of criteria and you maintain those criteria, then you can essentially pay nothing. My theory has been that China is able to do that in Hong Kong, because China has the heft that, for example, Barbados, which had a similar system, really wasn't able to keep. Now, what Barbados did is they flipped their tax system where the rates became regressive and they went down to like 1%. And so they had an interesting spin on saying, we'll be compliant. But the UAE is kind of doing the same thing, because what is exempt from this? All that to say, the UAE is exempting certain free zone companies, which is where a lot of nomad capitalists would go instead of their company. You might go to one of the international financial centers that are in Dubai or numerous places, and depending on how close you want to be to the action, how much prestige you want, how nice of an office you want, you might spend more money. Or if you're just kind of running a small remote business, then you might spend less money in one of the cheaper free zones. So you can go and incorporate your company in the free zone, and for now the free zones are exempt so long as they're not doing business somewhat similar to Hong Kong with the UAE companies. And so it's going to be interesting to see kind of the final version of what that's going to look like. In terms of the UAE's benefit, more so than a Hong Kong, being that you can come and you can hire people locally from anywhere in the world. You can get them visas, or you can bring your own talent and hire people from anywhere in the world and say, hey, I'll give you a visa. You live in Dubai, you live in Abu Dhabi, whatever. And then work from that actual free zone with the office space that they will give you to get that visa package. And so you have this system where a free zone company, you do your business, and what we always talk about, you sell stuff to the US, you sell stuff to Australia, you sell stuff to anywhere in the world, you will still be exempt from that. So you have this system where the free zones are going to be different from onshore, which in a sense, given everywhere that global minimum tax is trying to go, seems odd in that, what the global minimum tax was saying was, we're going to allow countries to set their own rates for local businesses. What we're going after is multinationals. Now, again, the future, I think, is going to be they want everyone to pay something, and we'll see some countries that won't go along with that. But what the UAE is basically doing is if you're running a business on the ground, you're going to start paying. Your employees aren't going to pay. Individual people working there aren't going to pay. Any kind of income that you earn that's not in connection with a business is not going to be eligible for tax. And so it's still going to be a great place to go as an employee, as someone who earns money from non-professional activities, and if you can run your company in a free zone. Here's what it says. The new corporate tax will not be applicable on income from personal employment or investments that do not arise from commercial activity. Firms involved in the extraction of natural resources, for all those of you who are doing that, will also be exempt from the new levy, and UAE firms will be exempt from paying tax on capital gains and dividends received from their qualified shareholdings. Businesses will also be able to credit foreign taxes paid against the amount of UAE corporation, which, if you're doing what we talk about here, the idea is not pay a bunch of foreign tax somewhere else and then go and be in the UAE. The Ministry of Finance said the current tax regime would continue to honor the corporate tax incentives offered to free zone businesses that comply with all regulatory requirements and do not conduct businesses with mainland UAE. The UAE will also not impose withholding taxes on domestic and cross-border payments, which is not a surprise, or subject foreign investors to corporation tax if they don't actually have a business presence in the UAE. So if you're doing business locally on the ground in the UAE, then you're going to start having to pay a tax. You're at basically Montenegro levels. And it'll be interesting to see if that level goes up. We've certainly seen countries like Andorra, which have come in and be pressured to impose taxes, and they've kept it pretty low. We've also seen countries that have decided to open up Pandora's box and then taxes go up. So, certainly the UAE is an interesting place for all the aforementioned reasons of, bringing talent, having kind of a hub, having a vibrant place to do business. Will this affect the average nomad capitalist going to do business with there? I actually don't think so. I think that you'll continue to see benefits at least for the foreseeable future. Don't stop now. We've got well over 1,000 more videos here on YouTube for you to watch and learn how to go where you're treated best. And if you want to work with Nomad Capitalists personally, go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply, learn about our unique, tried and true process, garnered over years of experience, and learn how you can become our client.